It started like any other afternoon at this small, family-owned restaurant just off the highway. The kind of place where regulars know the cook by name, and the sweet smell of fried chicken and warm cornbread greets you before you even walk in. But on this day, things were about to take a turn no one saw coming. A group of bikers, loud, rough-looking, the type that made heads turn when they rolled up, pulled into the gravel lot. Leather jackets, roaring engines, and tough attitudes filled the air. They weren't just here for lunch, they came to be noticed, and that's exactly what happened. Inside, sitting at a corner table, was a woman named Tanya, strong, confident, and not one to back down. She was enjoying her meal alone, minding her business, but you could tell she carried herself with a quiet power, the kind that made you think twice before messing with her. But the bikers didn't know that. It started small, snide comments, a few laughs thrown her way. Maybe they thought it was harmless. Maybe they thought she'd ignore it. But Tanya didn't flinch. She kept eating, calm as ever. That's when things escalated. One of the bikers stepped closer, leaning over her table. His tone changed, more aggressive. People in the restaurant got quiet. You could feel the tension tighten in the air. Everyone was watching, wondering what would happen next. Was Tanya going to back down, call for help? What happened in the next few minutes would leave everyone stunned and teach those bikers a lesson they'd never forget. But let me tell you, it wasn't what anyone expected. Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started. Tanya slowly put down her fork. She didn't look up right away. She took her time, wiping her mouth with a napkin, like she wasn't in any kind of hurry. The biker towering over her shifted his weight, trying to look tougher, but you could tell he was expecting a different reaction. Maybe he thought she'd get scared, maybe he thought she'd argue back, but this calm, that threw him off. The other bikers watched from their table, their laughter quieter now, but still there. A couple of the regulars in the restaurant glanced at each other, uneasy. Folks around here didn't want trouble. They knew how fast things could go bad, but no one wanted to get involved either. This was one of those moments. You either stayed quiet or you stood up, and everyone was wondering what Tanya would choose. What they didn't know was Tanya had been through worse, much worse. Life hadn't exactly been kind to her. She'd grown up in a tough neighborhood, worked 2 jobs just to keep her head above water, and had seen more disrespect than most people could handle. But every time life pushed, she pushed back harder. That's how she survived. That's how she became the woman she was today. But she didn't wear her struggle on her face. To most, she was just a well-dressed woman having lunch. No one could see the strength built over years of standing up for herself. And right now, sitting in that small restaurant, that strength was about to be tested again. The biker leaned in closer, his voice low but sharp. Tanya finally met his eyes. There was no fear in hers, just something steady. Something that made him blink, just for a second. Everyone held their breath. Something was coming. But what? Tanya's eyes stayed locked on his, steady and sure. The biker's smirk twitched, like he was trying to hold onto it, but something in her stare made it harder. He was used to getting his way, especially when he leaned in like that, all tough and in control. But this time, it felt different. He wasn't sure why, but it made him uncomfortable. One of the other bikers, a younger guy with a bandana tied around his head, called out from their table, trying to keep the mood light. "What's taken so long over there? She giving you a hard time?" The others laughed, but it was that kind of laugh people do when they're not sure what's really happening. Tanya still hadn't said a word. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than anything in that room. The older man sitting near the window, the one who came in every day for coffee, shifted in his chair. He looked worried. He'd seen situations like this turn ugly before, and he didn't want that for this place, or for Tanya. But Tanya knew something they didn't. She knew these types. She'd worked with them, lived near them, even had to put a few in their place before. They liked to act strong, but deep down, They were always testing people, seeing who would fold and who wouldn't, and she had no plans to fold. The waitress, a young woman named Lisa, peeked from behind the counter. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the coffee pot. She didn't know if she should step in or stay back. The manager was in the back room, and if things went south, help wouldn't come fast. The biker leaned in just a little more, his voice dropping lower. "You think you're tough," he muttered. Tanya's lips curled, just slightly. She was ready. The room felt tighter now, like the air was thicker. Every sound, clinking dishes, the hum of the soda machine, faded into the background. All eyes were on Tanya and the biker. Even the other bikers, who had been joking just a minute ago, were quiet now, watching closely. They knew their guy. He didn't back down, and he didn't like to be challenged. But something about this was making him uneasy, even if he wouldn't admit it. Tanya didn't move, but her eyes never left his. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was control. And that was what was throwing him off the most. He had come over expecting to own the moment, but now it felt like he wasn't in charge at all. The younger biker, the one with the bandana, shifted in his seat. He was starting to feel that second-hand tension, the kind that made you tap your foot under the table and glance at the door, just in case. He leaned toward the older guy next to him, whispering, "Maybe we should go, man. This is getting weird." But the older one just shook his head, eyes locked on the scene. Lisa, behind the counter, tried to catch Tanya's eye, like she wanted to ask if she was okay, but Tanya didn't break her focus. She was still, like someone who had been in this exact situation before, like she knew exactly how far to let it go. The biker leaned even closer now, his voice a little lower but tight. "You think you're better than me? Sitting here all quiet like you own this place." His hand rested on the back of the chair beside her. Tanya slowly leaned back, just a little, her voice finally breaking the silence. "Calm, but firm. I don't think anything. I just know you're in my space." The room froze. Everyone braced. Something was about to happen. The biker's hand tightened on the chair, his knuckles going pale. That calm response from Tanya, it wasn't what he wanted. He needed her to flinch, to get loud, to give him something he could work with. But she didn't. That control she had, it was cutting through his ego, and everyone could see it. Before he could say another word, the chime above the restaurant door jingled. It seemed like nothing at first, just another customer. But when the door swung open, every head turned, including the bikers. A tall man stepped in, wearing a crisp suit, but with a walk that carried the same confidence as Tanya. He scanned the room quickly, like he was trained to notice details. His eyes locked onto Tanya, and for a split second, something unspoken passed between them. The biker in front of Tanya noticed it too. "Friend of yours?" he muttered, though his voice didn't sound as sure as before. Tanya didn't answer. She didn't need to. The tension had shifted, but it hadn't broken. If anything, it had grown heavier. The man in the suit took a seat near the door, acting casual, but everyone sensed he was here for a reason. The bikers exchanged glances, some curious, some uneasy. The younger one with the bandana leaned toward his buddy again. "Who was that guy?" he whispered. "Don't know, but I don't like it," the older one replied. The lead biker, still hovering over Tanya, tried to hold his ground. He wasn't about to back off now, not in front of his crew, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, like he was starting to realize he might have picked the wrong place, the wrong person, and now maybe the wrong day. The room felt ready to snap. Everyone was waiting to see what would break first. The lead biker shifted his weight, trying to hold onto that tough front, but everyone could see it. He wasn't as sure anymore. That man in the suit hadn't said a word, but his presence changed everything. The room was different now. Even the laughter from the other bikers had faded into silence. Tanya stayed calm, her eyes never leaving the man in front of her. She knew this was the moment, the breaking point. Either he would push things too far, or he'd realize he was out of his depth. The biker opened his mouth like he was about to say something, maybe one last shot at keeping control. But before he could speak, the man in the suit stood up. He didn't rush, didn't raise his voice. He just stepped forward, hands in his pockets, but his eyes locked on the lead biker. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice low but firm. The biker straightened up, trying to mask his hesitation. "Just talking," he said, though his tone wasn't as strong as before. The man in the suit nodded slowly. "Good. Let's keep it that way." The biker glanced at his crew. He was looking for backup, but they weren't giving him much. The younger one was staring down at his drink, and the older one was already shifting like he was ready to leave. Tanya leaned forward, her voice cool but final. "You've had your fun. Time to go." There it was, the end of the line. The lead biker knew it. He stepped back, muttering something under his breath, but it didn't matter. The tension broke as they gathered their things and left, boots crunching on gravel outside. But just as the door closed behind them, Tanya glanced at the man in the suit. "Right on time," she said with a small smile. He nodded back. "Always." No one in the restaurant knew, but that man wasn't just a friend. He was something more. Someone watching over her, just in case. And today, he'd been needed. The door swung shut, and for a few moments, the restaurant stayed quiet. It was that kind of silence after something tense, like everyone was still processing what just happened. Then, slowly, the normal sounds came back. Plates clinking, chairs scraping the floor, quiet conversations starting up again. Lisa, the waitress, let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. She walked over to Tanya's table, her voice soft. "You okay?" Tanya gave a small smile. "I'm good," and she meant it. The man in the suit sat back down, stirring his coffee like nothing had happened. That's how he was, always calm, always watching. Tanya had known him for years. He wasn't family by blood, but he was family in every other way. He had her back, no matter what. And today, like so many times before, he'd proven that again. The older man by the window gave a respectful nod toward Tanya before going back to his paper. He had seen strength before, but what he saw today was different. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was quiet, steady, real power. The younger biker with the bandana glanced through the window outside. He watched his crew climbing on their bikes, but he looked different now. Like he was thinking. Like maybe he learned something today. About respect, about strength, about knowing when to walk away. Tanya finished her meal. She didn't rush. She had nothing to prove. When she finally stood, she thanked Lisa and left a generous tip. As she stepped outside into the warm sun, she saw the bikers in the distance, engines rumbling as they disappeared down the road. Tanya smiled to herself. She had faced worse before, and she would face more again. But today, she stood her ground, just like always.